Yeah, I think it has started.
Okay, so sir, can we start?
Yeah, please, Sharma sir.
Yeah. So a very good morning to all of you. Good morning to all the participants, organizing committee members, and today's esteemed resource person, Dr. G. Raghavendra Raju. I am very happy to introduce the resource person of this session, Dr. Raghavendra Raju. He is presently the director of Sri Satyasai Institute of Higher Learning, a deemed university in Puttaparthi at Andhra Pradesh. He is also holding the charge of head Department of Economics in the same university. Dr. Raju is a doctorate in econometrics and also qualified the University Grants Commission National Eligibility Test for Lecturership in Econometrics. Presently, he is the project director for Indian Council of Social Science Research funded research project entitled A Structural Model of the Current Account of India's Balance of Payment under the new economic policy regime. Dr. Raju has also specialized area of interest in teaching and research, namely macroeconometric modeling, international economics, and finance, monetary, and macroeconomics. He is also an expert in econometric modeling softwares such as eViews and SPSS. Due to his profound knowledge in economic theory, the tools of econometrics and data analysis software, he has been able to publish more than 32 research papers in reputed journals such as Asian Economic Review, Journal of Economic Policy and Research, and Journal of International Economics, and 9 research papers in edited books. Dr. Raju also co-authored a book on current account of India's balance of payments along with Dr. Vishwanath Pandit, who is the mentor of many governors of Reserve Bank of India, the economists and statisticians in our country. I am also happy to share with all the participants that in the recent convocation of the university on 23rd November 2020 this year, Dr. Raju was felicitated as the best teacher in his university. Sri Satyasai University, from where Dr. Raju is presently placed, focuses on values, ethics, and culture-based education in all their programs which they are offering. Moreover, the university follows the pattern of modern Gurukula, which believes the cultivation of human values is alone the true education. So Dr. Raju is the right person for today's session on guidelines for report writing, research ethics, and plagiarism. I am sure all the participants will be immensely enriched in the area of research ethics after his presentation. So I, Dr. TVJ Sharma, on behalf of Cyber, heartily welcome him for this particular session and request him to start his session. Thank you and welcome, sir.
Good morning to everyone. First and foremost, I thank Professor TVJ Sharma sir for the wonderful introduction about me. I hope I come up to some of the aspects that has been explained about me in the introduction. Uh, it's my I would really feel it as a proud privilege and also an honor to be invited as the resource person for this Atal 5-day FDP program, which is organized by the Cyber. I should also go on record that it was the Cyber, where my journey as a resource person started off almost a decade back. Whereas it was Sharma sir was instrumental in, requesting me if I can make it, and that was my first thing. And then I take Bhagwan's permission, and Swami has granted that, and that's how I would say I started my journey as a resource person, and then it's a history. I could, attend many conferences, and this as a resource person. First and foremost, I thank the management of Cyber, continuing to invite me in the academic interaction with the Cyber and its participants. I thank Sonia ma'am, who is the coordinator of the FDP, and also all the other organizing members of the FDP, who has put in a lot of effort, because I know I've been conducted a lot of conferences. I know the how much of hard work it is essentially to make these things to happen. So thank you, ma'am, and also congratulations. Today the last day, so we're almost coming to the validity kind of thing. So thank you, ma'am, for inviting me as the resource person. I would also like to thank the management of the cyber. I mean, I really don't know because people keep changing, and every time I come, I find new person over there. So I don't remember the names. Kindly excuse me, but the trustees and the management board of the cyber, I thank you profusely for giving me this opportunity. With these few words, I would like to go to the presentation. Once again, good morning to all the participants, and I hope this session would be very productive. Coming to the topic that was eventually given to me, to be very frank, Sharma sir has listed me 3, 4 topics and said, which one will you choose? So to be frank, I have decided I'll choose this, not that because this is the last session and then somehow we are just getting it completed. No, essentially because this is something which is more closer to our hearts. As sir was saying that Satsa University stands for value-based integral system of education, where it's not just academics, but we also need to think about the character building of the individuals. So the major chunk of research ethics attracted me, to take up this particular topic, because in other conference I did talk about, sampling, then techniques and all other aspects, which is mundane, and a lot of literature is available. But I thought this is more closer to our heart, so I thought something should be done with respect to this. So that's one of the reasons why I have, picked this particular topic. And the broad area that I'll be covering essentially is the guidelines for the report writing, research ethics, and plagiarism. Of course, it's a very broad, really broad in that sense, because report writing itself is a vast ocean in that you're expecting to consider the guidelines part. And then ethics, research ethics, again, a broad portion. We actually have a courses offered on research ethics over here in SIHL. So what is offered in a semester, we are trying to do it in an hour or so. And of course, one of the aspects of ethics that we need to think about research is the plagiarism part. So I have two areas to cover. One is the reporting writing part, and then the other comes the research ethics part. I'm sure all the earlier speakers who have been talking to you last 4 days, they did cover other aspects of research, why research, and how we need to conduct the research, what kind of sampling we need to do, how to design a research problem, how to think of hypotheses, how to test the hypothesis, which instruments are useful. So all those aspects have been already discussed and covered by the earlier speakers. So I would feel that I thank them because they have laid a very strong foundation. The next step we have is, how do we write a report based on the work that we already done? So we would have done some analysis, we would have done some empirical studies, or whatever various techniques we have used. So how do we try to make a report out of that? So, and at the same time, we do write a report, but how effective that report is. So, and what are the guidelines that are generally expected to be followed to write an effective report? And let me tell you, off late, report writing has become buzzword is one thing, but it's become so common that, suppose you go to a superior and say, I do that, frankly speaking. Somebody comes up, sir, can we propose this? Why don't write a report and send it to me? Because I really don't have time to, listen to him and explain and, all those things. So I say, why don't you give it in written format? So it's as simple as, suppose I want to propose to do something in a lawn. I say, can you give a report on this? Or some indiscipline case comes to more, notice. So then I say, can you make a report? Committee is formed, and then we expect the committee to write a report on what has happened and things like. So this report writing has become a normal feature, but I would generally concentrate on the academic research report writing as such. I'm not talking about the general report writing, but I'll concentrate more on the guidelines with respect to a structural report or an academic report, which includes maybe a proposal writing, or it could be a progress report for a project, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I'll just brush through because we have already about 15 minutes we have covered. So I'll just leave the PPT at the end of the session, so we don't need to write down or waste time in going every word by word. But so when you say report writing, the first and foremost important is what exactly is a report. So report is nothing but a written presentation. We keep talking, as I told you, somebody expresses his views, but I haven't had time to listen. So I say, why don't you document it? So it's as simple as it's a written presentation of the factual information. So this could be based on either an investigation or to based on your research. Suppose you do research in a particular area, you want to know the effectiveness of a policy. Suppose a particular policy was introduced in your state by the state government. To understand its effectiveness, you may do a survey, you may do an analysis, and then the best part is, see, all that you have done is maybe 6 months, 1 year. For example, as sir was saying, I'm the director for one of the projects. It's 2 year span. So end of the 2 years, so 2 years is the hard work that goes in. But please understand that 2 years, whatever hard work has gone in, should be materialized into 10 to 15 pages. So what have you done in those 2 years? I mean, definitely I've done the best, but just imagine if you're not able to impress them in that 10-15 pages, all the work that you have done, it goes waste, it's futile. So that's where I'm trying to impress that research writing is very, very, very important. When it comes to a research proposal, or it could be a progress report, for example, progress report equally important, because they have given you 2 years, mid time, maybe after 9 months, they may ask you to write a progress report. If suppose the progress was very shabby, they will not be interested to release the further grants. They will not be in a position to release the funds. So this is where we try to understand that report writing is very, very, very essential and very important aspect in the academia and the current scenario. So this could be based on either an investigation, as I told you, some indisciplined case, you do investigation, or it could be even journalism, but again, I'm not getting into that part, and so on and so forth. And or it could be even a pure academic research. You just pick up a problem out of your interest, and then, for example, I mean, my area of confidence is interest economics. So last 1 year, our CAD has been, getting minimized. On one side, we celebrate, wow, CAD is getting lowered. But the other side, we also understand that lower CAD means lower economic activity. Now, is that something to be accepted? I mean, we may celebrate that CAD is low, but is that what India wants? Because that also reflects the weakening of the demand. It also reflects weakening of the economy. So I may be interested to correlate the link between CAD and economic growth. So just out of academic pursuit, I may take up this problem and do something. But the best part is, end of the study, I would like to publish that. So that's again, we talk about the report writing. So this report writing essentially forms a very strong basis for solving the problems or taking decisions. As I told you, end of the day, off late people are talking a lot about policy implications. We do report, and the standard report includes, the table of contents and, the introduction, the body, blah, blah, blah. But the most important thing which everyone looks at is the policy decision. The report writing essentially helps people to make very quick decisions. So that's where we have a lot of committees set up, and the committee is supposed to give them recommendations. So that's also, in some sense, it is the reports, right? And so essentially report writing is used for problem solving and also used for making decisions when it comes to policy decisions. Of course, when you try to classify, you have varieties of reports. As I told you, everybody wants a report these days. You can classify them for the sake of classification as maybe short report, long report, formal, informal, informational, analytical. Analytical is more, I said, we do a lot of exercises and things. Then vertical, lateral. So we have, if the reports are asked by your peers, your colleagues across, then it becomes vertical. Lateral is where your super boss, your vertical is opposite. I'm sorry. Vertical is where you have to answer to somebody, and then it could be amongst the peers itself. Then it could be internal reports, external reports. It's not that every report that is being written, it's that it reaches Delhi or it reaches, say, your capital city. It did not happen. It could be as close as to your institute itself. It could be as close as your department itself. So it could be internal reports or it could be external reports. It also includes minutes of the meetings and audit reports, closure reports, proposals, and varieties of reports that we have. Right now, before we venture into a writing report, there are some of the aspects that we need to keep in mind. The first and foremost important aspect is purpose. Why are we writing this report? Because that purpose of the report essentially, it tells you whether should I write a formal report or should I write an informal report. That talks about the seriousness of the problem. As I just told you, if suppose I'm submitting a project proposal, now that's a serious activity, because end of the day, I'm asking grants to be sanctioned by an agency, and I need to be really rigor, I need to be serious, I need to impress them. So it has to be a very formal report. It can't be very informal, saying, hi, how are you doing? Can you kindly, release 3 lakhs? I have a project for 6 months. You can't put it as simple as that. So that's where we see that the purpose is very, very important. And that also tells you what are your goals. So based on the purpose, we need to understand whether it would be a formal or it would be an informal report. So that's the first thing. As I told you, it's essentially because the seriousness. Obviously, when it comes to formal reports, the seriousness is a bit more. Informal, it's okay. Like it could be routine. As I told you, very frank, minutes of the meeting is also a report. But again, being a director, I know, to be very frank, we really don't go by every minute of the meeting that is sent by the departments. So sometimes the minutes of the meeting are meant only to, stock them. You will not have time to really go through. Maybe once in a year, you'll have time to quickly go through. So that's where it could be a formal or informal. The second important aspect is audience. Who is who is the audience is? Who are the stakeholders? So based on the stakeholders, in the sense how it's going to help them. As I said, if it's going to be a government agency, obviously it will be useful for policy implications. Okay, I mean, I do know that it's not that all the participants are more towards humanities or economics or social sciences. There are also a few faculty from sciences and other departments. So I'll try to generalize with respect to the examples to great extent possible. So what happens is, like, when I submit a report, the primary audience, I mean, who is going to receive this report? And how is he going to get affected? I said, will he infer something? Will he use some part of my recommendation as policy implications? For example, Monetary Policy Committee we have, they meet once in 2 months. So the committee decides, the 6-member committee decides, should we change the repo rate? Should we allow it to remain the same? So then you get a minutes of the meeting. So that tells you as to what is the outcome of the particular meeting. Then the context, what is the background in which they're asking us to write the report? I mean, what is the purpose of it? And usability, as I told you, for whom this report is used. So all these things have to be kept in mind when you're thinking about the audience. The next one, when it comes to the formal reports, professionalism is very, very important. I mean, as I just told you, we need to impress them with your report. So it has to be as professional as possible. So the more the professional in the sense, more structured, very good language, good, it should be very concise, it should be very coherent, it should hit the bullseye. You shouldn't keep beating around the bush and wasting the time. There's no much time also. So in some sense, your report should be very crisp. It should not be as short as 1/2 page. I'm not putting it that way, but cover only what is necessary. So it should be professional, because end of the day, when I submit a proposal, I don't sit next to him and read out the proposal. I don't call him up and say, sir, this is my proposal. I give the proposal. So it just means, I remember, I mean, how many of you, I mean, all of us have seen old movies. So when we get a letter from our neighbor, relative or somebody, when we read a letter, some of their face gets imprinted on the letter. It's like they're reading out to you, but that's not going to happen in the proposals, right? So these reports are essentially a way to communicate to your audience. So it should be as effective as possible. And I said the language is important, and the organization, the structure is important. Thus, the reports need to be clear, concise, and also should be coherent. And then we have, I mean, this is the background, like what is the purpose? This is all done before we start writing the report, like who the audience is, what is the purpose of report. And as I said, if it is structural, you need to be more professionalism and so on. But the major chunk are the next 3 parts, whereas the front part essentially means that the first portion of the report, which includes the title page, the abstract, the table of contents, the list of figures. I'll come to details of each of them in detail. And this is general, I mean, including myself, most of us feel that we should start with introduction, because we all say, so introduction is first chapter. So even students get tempted, sir, should I start writing introduction? My answer is no, because introduction is something that should be written at the end. And the end in the sense that essentially what your objectives are, and then what your analysis is based on the results, based on your outcomes. And then, because introduction should give you the gist of what it covers in the rest part of the part 2 and part 3. So this is, I personally feel, something should not be, should not start writing the report with introduction, right? I'm saying, when I say, when you're structuring that, introduction should be the last one to come in, essentially because you really do not know what will be the outcome. You just started your work. So just because you started on the day when, you can't say, okay, chapter 1 introduction, it doesn't make sense. So it's essentially prefer to push it at the end. Then comes the body. There's a major chunk, and that's again, I would say in terms of percentage, maybe 60% is the body, which includes, the description, the empirical findings, the analysis, the objectives of the study, the methods of the study that are used, the data methodology, and all those things. That's a major part. That's the body of it. And then you have the fag end. That's the tail kind of thing. That's the back end part, which includes the supplemented document, which generally don't get considered as the number of pages, because in some cases they're very strict about the number of pages. So what generally we try to do is that all the additional information that is needed, the supplement documents such as the bibliography, the appendices, the glossary, index, sometimes the data sheet itself, the questionnaire, for example, all those comes under the back matter, the additional thing that is generally put it as the back matter. So this is obvious. So these are the things that we need to keep in mind before we start writing our report, right? And the structure of a report, I mean, this is a standard structure. So it includes the title page, the table of contents, the abstract, the executive summary, the introduction, the findings. Sometimes discussion also is part of that. Sometimes they call it as empirical findings and analysis. Then you have conclusions, then recommendations. That's very important, the major policy implications. And then you have references and appendices. So this is one of the broad area that we talk about when you say research. When you say ideally a report, it should consist of all these things, ideally speaking. But it's also possible that in some cases everything may not be covered. In some things, they may try to remove them for some reason. And I'll just take a minute just to show a sample report. Okay, this is a sample report where I've just taken from the web as it is. This report essentially talks about the effects of stress on the business employees. So I mean, we all know that we all are employees, so there's a lot of stress that is being faced by all of us. And what are the measures that are taken by the management, top management, in order to minimize this stress? So we'll just look at that. So I mean, I said this need not follow the structure, but this is more or less done. So this is the title. The title should be very catchy. This is prepared for whom? Whom are you planning to submit this report? And then it's prepared by whom? That's so two things are very important. And then of course the deadline or the completion date. So this covers the, you can say, the cover page or the front sheet or the covering page. So the title, and then we have prepared for whom and prepared by whom, and then the date of completion. And then you have the standard things like table of contents, so which includes the title, the subtitles, the sections, subsections, the page numbers, and so on and so forth. And then we have the list of tables. Sometimes we have to have tables, sometimes we have figures. But it's important that, I'm going to cover on plagiarism. It's important that everything that you are, taking from some source, or every graph or everything that you're showing, you have to have the source of that. Okay, it's very important. So you have list of tables and you have list of figures, or diagrams, some people say. And then we have the major body. So this includes the, as I just told you, the introduction. Of course, to be frank, what I felt in this was there was no executive summary. Ideally, every report should have an executive summary. I'll come to it later. And then it has the introduction, the statement. I mean, these are all standard. I mean, all of us are, colleagues in academia world, so we know all these things. So how do you define the problem and why the problem is, why the study is important, significance of the study, then the scope of the study, what it includes, and a quick LR. And I personally believe, my Professor Prashant Pandit used to always say that literature review, unfortunately, many people are not aware of this. Literature review should always be issue based. Unfortunately, when I evaluate thesis, it's very sorry to say, but unfortunately, students are unaware of this. So they do either alphabetically or they try to do this chronologically. I mean, it may serve the purpose because you're reviewing somebody, but you don't get the connectivity. But just imagine you make it issue based. For example, just to give an example, importance of foreign investments on economic growth. That's your title. So first objective is, first issue that you're going to cover is importance of capital in economic growth. Who all talked about it? X has talked about it, Y has talked about it, Z has talked about it, but he tried to contradict that. So if it is issue based, it's like you're reading a novel. So all the papers that have covered this issue comes under this particular LR, literature review. Then take up the second issue, for example, determinants of foreign investments. So what are the empirical findings that you have found? What are the variables that are economic variables or any macro variables which are influencing the capital flows, for example? And I said again, some people say these variables are important. Some people feel maybe micro variables are important. So whatever, you need to cross refer. It's not that you should always support somebody. You should say this was told by somebody, but this was not supported by somebody. So please try and cultivate this habit of writing LR, literature review, issue based. This will, I tell you, it will really impress the examiners. For example, if it's a thesis, it's going to be the examiners, or it is going to be the reviewers are going to be impressed. It is to be issue based. So please, you can take this into account. It will be very helpful. So LR should always be issue based. Okay, then it talks about the data and the methodology and what you have done, and then what is the sample that what analysis you have taken. And some people use limitations of the study here, some people put in introduction. It varies from person to person. It's up to us. There's no problem on that. And then it also has the major findings. So that's we call as the findings, conclusions, and then the recommendations. Anyway, so I don't want to get into. So this is a sample thing which I'm just trying to show you as to how a report looks like. So now I'm back to the presentation. So this includes very quickly, again, for the lack of time, I'll just rush through. It's already 11. So it includes the title page. So the title page is basically the title of the report. It should include the name and all that. Then the table of contents, the executive summary, then the terms of reference. Terms of reference, essentially, some journals ask us terms of reference to be incorporated. That essentially includes the objectives of the study. What is the purpose? What is the scope of the study? That's your terms of reference. And who has requested this particular report is reflected there. Then the methodology part, the procedure, and then the introduction, which we have just discussed. And the major part of the body are essentially the findings and discussions. That's, I said, the 60% of your report should concentrate on this. So what's your investigation? What are your outcomes of that? And how do you interpret the data? How do you analyze the data? Again, unfortunately, most of us stop with descriptive analysis. I mean, we call it as analysis, but remember, it's, for example, plotting a graph is not an empirical analysis. It's a descriptive analysis. Empirical analysis includes essentially trying to estimate an equation, trying to test something which is theoretically talked about. So empirical analysis is very, very important, and do not stop with just with descriptive analysis. Those graphs, pie charts, the composition, those are a descriptive analysis. They're not empirical analysis. So we need to have major chunk in empirical analysis. And then the conclusions, which is very important, and they're key aspects of it. And again, as an examiner, I'm being very frank with you, both, I mean, the introduction and the conclusions are very, very important, because when you say introduction, essentially the objectives of the study, because the examiner, to be frank, may not have time to go through your 300 and odd pages. Essentially what he does, he goes through the abstract, that's very important, executive summary. Then he goes through the objectives of your study, and then immediately he flips over and goes to the conclusions. Whether the reason is, whatever conclusion that we are drawing should be connected to your objectives. That's the reason why, as I have told you earlier, introduction should be written at the end, right? So your conclusion should be based on the objectives that you have picked up. So if your conclusion is not going to be something which is different from the objectives, then the sanctity is lost. So that's the conclusion part. And then the recommendations. I told you, off late, every research paper, even a lot of Indian journals are emphasizing on policy recommendations. And this is something which Professor Pandit has been talking a lot, and is a doyen of macroeconometric modeling. So there's a lot of issues on policy implications. So if your study doesn't have any policy implication or recommendation, that's a nomenclature they generally use. But in the parlance of econometrics, we say policy implications. It's very, very important. I mean, for whom this is important? For whom are you suggesting something to the body in which you're going to present this report? And then you have the references and bibliography. Of course, the difference is references whom you have cited. Bibliography is somebody whom you have referred to. You wouldn't have cited them, but you have just referred. Now, for example, today I have referred about 20 and odd articles. So they could be references. You need not cite them. That's the distinction. And then you have different styles, APA, MLA, and so on. But APA is most preferred. That is American Psychological Association, where it is more applicable to the empirical work, where some technical work is involved. People use APA. And of late, all the journals are also asking APA. But again, it is based on journal to journal. So kindly check the journal where you're submitting as to what style of referencing they want, because that's something which might irritate them. They may say, no, everything is fine, but we're not happy with the references. So kindly resubmit. So we may be wasting time. So before submitting, kindly check. There are the standard instructions given. So check which style of referencing they would like to have. And then you have appendices. That is, it includes, as I told you, questionnaire, the graphs. As I told, if you don't want part of your counting the number of pages, you can push it at the end. That is appendices. So the major chunk of your report essentially includes introduction, findings and discussions, conclusions, and recommendations. So these are the 4 important aspects when you talk about the report writing. So we understood what is report writing and what are the parts. Now, that's theoretically fine. But as I told you, how do you make your report very effective? As I told you, there are 2 things. I submitted a report for the sake of submitting a report. I have submitted a report where I'm sure that I'll get the proposal. So I'm referring to effective reporting. So report is there, but how effective that is. So the basic purpose of report is to give an account. First and foremost thing in effective reporting essentially is there should be transparency and inclusiveness. So we need to bring in all the people that are concerned with. We need to take into account all the aspects. We need to be very transparent with respect to the scope of the study, the doability, the data sources, what you're going to plan. So everything should be very, very transparent and inclusive. Another important aspect, which again, as I told you, doesn't happen unfortunately, is reports are to be cyclical in nature. In the sense, when my boss has asked me to submit a report, remember, there's a lot of effort goes in and I submit the report. But unfortunately, the boss, pulls out the drawer or opens the cupboard and then stacks it. The purpose is lost. So I would personally feel reports are something should be cyclical in nature. In the sense, the boss, whomsoever you're reporting to, should have time to go through them and then get back to you and say, okay, this is fine, but I'm not happy with this, or probably we can incorporate this. You have given this implication, this policy, but what does this mean? So it should be always, to and fro, reciprocative. It shouldn't be one-sided wherein, okay, for the sake of reporting, as I told you, minutes of the meeting, we submit every month. But how effective they are, again, unfortunately, it's not very effective. But reports should be effective. Only then you will, see, your end of the day, I have submitted something. If you say, Raju sir, you have done a good job, there's no scope for me to learn. For example, at the end of the session, you give feedback that Rao sir, it was good, but this was lacking. Rao sir, this was good, but this was not covered extensively. It's something for me to learn. It's something for me to take it up. So thus, if you feel that research or report writing should be productive, it should be cyclical in nature. It's not just one way. So to sum it up, before I go to the ethics part, so to sum it up, a good report is very easy to recognize in the sense it has a precise and informative title. I mean, this again, I keep telling my own students, sir, we give 1 year for them to do their dissertations. PhD, we give them 3 years or 4 years. So they, on the day one, we're excited, sir, what should be the title of my dissertation? What should be the title of my thesis? I said, wait a minute. In a later, we don't misunderstand. Of course, in US it's different, but India, you don't know whether you're going to give birth to a baby child or girl or a boy. So you don't. I mean, think of names, but you don't decide. Okay, this name is going to be Subramanya. It doesn't happen that way. You wait at the end of the thing, right? 9 months or whatever the time. So I mean, I'm sorry to use that example, but it's very relevant. So similarly, I always tell the students that title should be very catchy, and we always sometimes go to a movie based on the title of the movie. We don't know who the hero is, we don't know who the director is, we don't know what content is, but the title should be very catchy. So at times it is very, very useful. So the title should be very informative. It should reflect what you have written. It should cover us. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. This is very, very important. So the title should be catchy. Even proposals, to tell you frankly, in Delhi they receive hundreds and hundreds of proposals, because I know the inside part of it. They don't go through every proposal. They quickly glance at the titles. Suppose the title is very traditional, very normal, they put it aside. But suppose the title is very catchy, forget about the content, they would try to shortlist that. So it's very important that the title is very, very crucial. So it should be very informative title, very clear and precise title. The organization should be very clear, and the layout should be very clear. It should be easy to handle. It should open flat to reveal both the text and the diagram. So no story, no beating around the bush, because it's not a detailed study. It's just a report, okay, based on what you work, okay. And it is written in a very fluent and concise style. As I already told you, English grammar is very, very important. Diction is very, very important. It should indicate the content of every section, the diagram, the tables, and so on. So as I just told you, I mean, most of us know the components of a report, but unfortunately, what lacks essentially is trying to practice them. Right? We know the components, but we, for some reasons, I'll come to that all eventually at some point of time. But we try to, maybe because of laziness or whatever. But let me tell you, brothers, I mean, everyone, brothers and sisters, if we can make this, I mean, if you can try to incorporate some of these things, including myself, I'm also in a learning curve. I'm not very old. I'm just 40. So it's essentially good for every one of us if you're able to, implement some of these things. So thus we can make a report writing in a very, very effective manner. So that's the half of my, I mean, 1/3 of my presentation. So it's 11:10. So now I go to the next aspect, that is research ethics. Okay. But before even I talk about research ethics and the plagiarism, I mean, both are interconnected, because one of the research ethics which people may not follow is essentially, plagiarism. So that they are interconnected. So they are together, I can put them. But before I go to that, let us, all of us do agree that, all of us are in academic circles, right? And all of us are academicians, whether somebody may call you as or not, but all of us are academicians, right? And in academia, one of the things why, I mean, maybe for a few of you, this may be last resort, but for me, very frankly, right from the day I joined my PG program, I was determined that I should become a faculty. So I was passionate enough for that. So I'm sure that's the case with most of you researchers and academicians, that research and academia, that is teaching, is the primary thing. I mean, that's something which you have been, kind of waiting lifelong and so on. So, but what is important is that all of us also, I mean, all of us are academia, we are into academic, but we also want academic freedom. I mean, tell me who doesn't want academic freedom? Definitely want academic freedom, in the sense we want to publish the area, in which we are interested. We want to teach a paper, frankly, in which we are comfortable. I mean, for example, if I'm not that weak in econometrics and you say, Raju sir, can you teach econometrics? I may be, but I'm not comfortable. So I may tell my head saying that, I'm sorry, sir, can you give some other paper where I'm more comfortable? So definitely want freedom to choose the elective that they're going to offer, right? So tell me who doesn't want academic freedom? Everybody wants academic freedom. And academic freedom essentially deals with what? It deals with the freedom with respect to the study and pursuit of knowledge, with respect to teaching, or it could be with respect to the research, without any unreasonable interference. Remember, it doesn't say without any interference. So academic freedom doesn't mean, that's what it said in political science. You have the freedom to walk on the road, to rotate your stick, Till when? Till it doesn't touch your neighbor's nose. So till then you have the freedom to rotate your stick. But the moment it touches your neighbor's nose, there your restriction comes into picture. Just because the freedom, can I take a stick and move around? No, it doesn't. But in the home I can do. Similarly, you have the freedom to pick up the topic, you have the freedom to do research on your area. But remember, till a point, when it goes beyond a point, then definitely restrictions come into picture. So till that, what we call as bounded rationality. In economics, we say bounded rational. We are rational, but we are bounded by something. So till this bounded aspect, bounded rationality, in that sense, we have the freedom. And we don't want unreasonable, for example, when I'm taking class, I don't want my head to peep in and say, hey, Raju, are you teaching or no? Imagine every 1 hour he keeps coming and poking you. I mean, will you be motivated or will you get discouraged? Obviously, you get demotivated, right? So that's where we see we don't want unreasonable interference. When there's a need, yes, I do understand. When you're just into the beginning of teaching, yes, you need that interference, you need that counseling, you need that mentoring, all that is needed. But there's a limit to that. So anyway, so that's academic freedom. So all of us want to be not only physical freedom, like August 15th, we all celebrate freedom in that sense, but we also want academic freedom. But unfortunately, and that's what our founder, Chancellor Bhagwan Sathya Baba tells us is, all of us fight for our rights and nobody wants to talk about duties. It's really unfortunate, but it's very important that we train our students. Youngsters, not that I'm again very old, but somehow, the youth is carried away by rights. So it's my birthright. I should have a mobile. I should change my mobile every 6 months. It's my right. What the hell is not happening? Why it's not happening? We always think about rights. But are we thinking about the duties? We know the duties, unfortunately, but we don't think about duties. Similarly, we do talk about academic freedom, right? But what about the other essential duties that we need to bring in? We need to bring in, along with academic freedom, we also have responsibilities. We also have integrity. But are we talking about that? And this is ethics. Unfortunately, I'll come as a conclusion, but ethics is something, we know that. Everybody knows that we are supposed to go on the left-hand side. When you're going from this side, you're going to the right-hand side. You are supposed to wear the helmet. If we are not supposed to cross the, that zebra lining, we are not supposed to cross this thing. When the signal, you're not supposed to beat everything is known. Right, but unfortunately, for some reasons we take it for granted. Anyway, so coming back, so essentially when you talk about research ethics, before we get into research ethics, so I said we have academic freedom. All of us want academic freedom, but are we talking about the duties? Are we talking about responsibilities? Are we talking about the integrity of this? That is really lacking, right? So just as we are fighting for our academic freedom, it's also important that we need to think about the ethics part. We need to think about the responsibilities. So we should not stop only with the freedom part. We need to bring in at the same time the integrity, the accountability, and the responsibility in conduct. Not only teaching is one part, but this is not an FDP in that sense. It's more of research based. So we'll concentrate more on research aspects. So integrity, accountability, and responsibility in conducting academic research, and this forms the cornerstone. This is the crux of it. This is very, very, very important of any academic enterprise. And any violation, gross violation of the academic rules and regulations can be considered as a serial offense. So that's where I'll come to that, the offenses, etc. But so please do understand that we want academic freedom, but for some reason we don't want to bring in the duties. We only want the rights, but not the duties. Only when we gel. In fact, so Bhagwan tells, the founder chancellor tells, when you do your duties, rights will automatically come. You don't need to hesitate on the road. You don't need to go on hartal or bandh or anything. Once your duties are, you follow your duties, rights will automatically come. You don't need to ask him. It's like it's a shadow. But instead, we concentrate on the duties, the rights part, and we try to ignore the duties. Right. So this is where I'm trying to bring in the philosophy of our institute, wherein along with the rights, it's more important that we think about the duties. Automatically, rights will come into picture. Similarly, we want academic freedom, but we also need to think about the integrity of these aspects, the ethical perspective of these aspects. So I just told you, academic integrity requires that the academic research follows, high professional standards that have been set to themselves, which includes, framing ethical research design or ethical frameworks, adhering to a research ethics, and professional. Yeah. Yes, Panwar. Okay, fine. Yeah. So we do talk about the. Can you mute yourself? It's disturbing others. Sapna, ma'am.
Sapna Panwar, please mute yourself.
Okay. So we talk about academic, as I told you, freedom, but we also need to bring in the integrity. So Some of the principles of the and the values regarding academic integrity includes such as commitment to honesty, trust, fairness, respect, responsibility, legality, and other dimensions. So this I will come little later. So when you talk, so now we go to research ethics part. So when you talk about research ethics, what is research? Technically, I quote this: research is a formal and systematic application of scientific approach to the study of a problem to discover new information or expand and verify existing knowledge. So to put it in layman terms, research is a formal and systematic approach. It's a structured one. And what are you doing in this structured? It's a formal thing. And what are you doing in that? Either you try to invent something new. I mean, that happens mostly to sciences, science background. We try to invent something. So discuss something new. Or what do? You try to expand and verify the existing knowledge. Most of the social sciences does this part of research. So what do we do? Already somebody have done work, say for example, a developing country like say for example China, and we want to test whether the same kind of thing can be applicable to this. Somebody has tested, trying to find a COVID kit for a particular thing. So we try to imitate the same thing. So this is where we see that it's important that in research, either end of the day in research, either we try to discover something new or we try to expand and even verify what is already available. So two things: either find out new or you try to expand what is already existing. Now in both the things, ethics is very, very important, and ethics essentially includes a code of conduct. It's just the gist of it. It's a code of conduct. It includes moral. I mean, there are a lot of synonyms for ethics. Morality is one synonym for ethics. So it includes the moral principles, right? And it also includes in terms of understanding and examining the moral life and what is right. I mean, a very simplest term: what is ethics? What is right? What is wrong? Doing right thing is ethical. Doing wrong thing is unethical, right? So this is where we see that research is all about finding out new things, discovering new things, and trying to expand or verify the existing knowledge. That's one part. The other part is the ethics part of it. Now, why do we need to connect them? The need for connecting these two is very important, because on one side, you're trying to say that I'm going to find something totally new. So when you're going to find something totally new, don't you think that should be very ethical in nature? Do you want to duplicate somebody's work? Do you want to copy somebody's work? Do you want to do your own work? That's called self-plagiarism these days. That's being talked about, redundant literature. People are repeating the same paper, same content with different titles. Or is you want something new? So when you want to give to the world something new, isn't that should be perfect? Anything that we talk about should be perfect. So perfect is something which doesn't have any impurities. It is as pure as, say for example, a piece of ice. It's very transparent, very ice thing. So thus we see that so when we want to do research, it's important that we have to bring in the ethics part. So there are a lot of ethical principles again, and it's important, and it's a duty of the researcher to fully understand the ethics that are involved. I mean, again, for sciences, this is very, very, very critical, because a lot of clinical trials, and they have this research ethics committee, REC they call it, and before they even venture into a pilot study, that should be approved by the research ethics committee. So it's a lot of procedure. I mean, luckily for social sciences, we don't need to have that kind of, because end of the day, for example, if I say exchange rate is very influential in determining the trade flows, yeah, I say that, but it's not going to affect anybody, right? But if I want to prove, for example, if I want to identify a medicine for, say, COVID, for example, what's happening in the pandemic. Now, remember, that is something to do with lives of the individuals. So it's very important that we have to take into account that this research, more so the sciences I'm talking about, should be ethical and not at some point right from beginning till the end. And research, as in the last point talks about it, it is a public trust. And this belongs to everybody, right? And you are part of the system. It's important that you go back to the system, what is expected. So it's a public trust. That's the reason why it should be ethically conducted. It should be trustworthy and should also be socially responsible, right? So as I just told you, since you're trying to find out something totally new, it's all the more important that this should be very ethical in that nature, and it should be it should be in line with already existing ethical standards. And I just told you that every step, it's not that only the final outcome will be ethical. No, it's not that. Every step of your research, right from thinking of the problem, how we are going to ask the funds, we are going to get the funds from, using the funds. Again, I'm not getting into the details, but how the funds are used, all of us know. How we have kind of bogus bills coming in, all of us know. So this is where, siphoning away the government's money, taxpayers' money. So that's why I said ethics is something which is like, you don't need to think ethics as a separate entity. For example, I'm talking to you, breathing is normal. I don't realize that I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. I don't do it as separate entities. It's part of it. I don't need to think separately. Similarly, just as your breathing is part of your all of our life, your ethics should be part of your research, it should be part of your academia, right? So that's part and parcel of your system. So we don't need to think up. So at every aspect of the research, we have to bring in the ethical aspects. So right from formulating research questions to the publication. So starting with writing a proposal till you publish, everything has to be guided by the ethics part of it, and that brings in the integrity. And this is a very beautiful diagram, which essentially tells you, as I just told you, on one side, why do we research? We do research in order to advance the knowledge. For example, you have better medicines, you have better equipment, you have better gadgets. That's your advancement. All that's happening because of research. But at the cost of what? If it's going to hurt the sentiments of the people, if it's going to hurt the individual's life, if it's going to be something very serious, it's going to help their health, it's not something to be expected. So the difference here is very clear. Once you have your ethical research, which includes ethics and research, as I told you, that the two sides of the balance, then you will have a balanced approach. So you have advancement of knowledge on one side and your protection of subject or welfare or rights. So these two need to be balanced. Unfortunately, what's happening in the real world is we are giving more emphasis on the knowledge. By hook or crook, I want to publish something. By something, I want to do something and then get it published. So I'm more worrying only about the knowledge part. I'm not really looking at what is going to happen to the humanity. What is the side effect of particular dose which I have tried to identify. So in medical research, I'm talking. So this is where we see, if you do not have enough adequate or enough framework for research, it's going to be very, very detrimental. So it's very important that we need to have a balance between the two. So this balance mainly helps us to understand as to why we need to have ethics in the research activities. Okay, all of us feel that I'm a good person. Frankly, I'm a good person, to be very frank with you, because I've been in this place for so many years and I'm trained. My family is very traditional, so I'm a good person. So should I also think about research ethics? And let us also understand that it is not that when you say research ethics and you're unethical, it's not that you're doing something bad. Bad things are done by the bad people. I'm not getting into that part of it. Okay, I'm trying to tell you that I'm not saying bad person, but sometimes we may be imperfect persons. So this research or ethics in research is applicable to everybody. So I may be product of this place. I don't need research ethics. No, it is not. I also need that, because I may not do something totally unethical, but what might happen is I may do something which is not perfect. And Bhagwan believes perfection, 100% perfection. Whatever you're offering, remember, you're offering to the Lord. Whatever activity you're giving back to the society. So when you give back to the society, do you give something which is not perfection, which is not perfect, which is less than perfection? No, we do not. So we want to do everything perfect. So let us not have a misconception that just because I'm not a bad person, so I don't need research ethics. No, you may be a good person, but even then you need research ethics, because just as I've written here, so it is not necessary that only the bad people do the evil things. Yes, all of us know that. But when it comes to research, it's just not that about the bad part. It's about how imperfect people doing imperfect things. Okay, that's the beauty of it. It's imperfect things, imperfect people doing imperfect things. So which means, as I told you, I publish. But what kind of publication am I doing? Is it perfect? So that's what I'm trying to make us understand. So just to give an example. So I may be a good person, but of late or for some reason, I may do something which is imperfect. 99% may be the best. I'm not trying to say that whatever I'm saying, there's Trikarna Shuddhi. God, Bhagavan tells thought, word, and deed. So whatever I'm trying to say is not that I'm implementing, but I am on the on the progression of implementing those. So that's very, very important. So we need to be perfect in that sense, 10%, 100% perfection. When we dedicate something to the society, when we dedicate our research work to the God, or we always offer over to God or your parents, your loved ones. So when you offer, suppose you're offering a rose, do you think you want a rose which is crumpled? Do you want a rose without a petal? No, we don't expect that. We don't want. Do you want a rose with a thorn? No, we don't. We ensure that we remove the thorns, we put it plaster, we do all those things, because we don't want to discomfort somebody by taking the rose. It might prick them. Just imagine, for something for a fraction of a second, you don't want to hurt somebody, but do you want to do you want to do research which is going to harm the society? Definitely not. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. Sometimes out of our excitement, we may try to do imperfect things at times. So what are the reasons? Sometimes some of the things are, it's not intentionally we do. Like, so for example, socially acceptable practices. We know it's wrong. I know I broke the line. I crossed the zebra lining, but I know it's okay. But nobody was there, so I crossed it. How many of us really follow traffic rules when there's really no traffic man? We really don't. Right. So that's where, so some it's socially accepted. So I also will, I'm like with the Janata, I try to do that. Sometimes by accident, by mistake, as I told you. And sometimes, we do wrong, but we try to justify later. No, actually, I know it's a wrong, but because of this convenient philosophy. Right. So that comes in sometimes. And sometimes we may blame somebody that he is responsible. So for example, my student is working with me, I've hired him for my research. And if somebody says, Raju, what you have done is wrong, see, it's not me, it's my student who has done the research, so you can check with him. Can I be that way? No, because I am the author, I am the director of the particular project. So it's my responsibility to ensure that everything goes on fine. So it's not easy to blame somebody for not your mistakes, right? And most important is, and the other psychological thing, but the most important thing which all of us go through, including myself, frankly, is the professional pressures. So it's not that we intentionally want to do a mistake, but maybe due to the professional pressures, which includes publish or perish. I'm sure most of you have experienced this, or at least some of us have experienced this. Publish or perish. You want promotion? Publish, and that's now become a mandatory. And also for that reason, you have hundreds and hundreds of journals available in the market. And of course, UGC is doing its best. They are trying their best. That careless journal has come, and all those things they're trying. But how far it's effective is something for each one of us to answer ourselves. Anyways, so one reason why you may kind of become unethical a bit to extent or not be perfect essentially is maybe because you have to publish or perish. Maybe because of the tenure. For example, you'll be thrown away from the job, right? In order to retain the job, you have been joined as a temporary lecturer for 2 years in a college. So to continue that, to impress your director, you want to say, yes, sir, I have done 2 years done teaching, but I also, published a paper. So sometimes because of that pressure, we may, kind of be unethical. I'll come to what unethical means is. Then keeping up with the peers. Again, sometimes competition. Your neighbor has 5 publications, I got only 4. I should do something to beat him. Brothers and sisters, my personal observation is, I have really learned that the moment we stop comparing with others, that will be the day we will be very happy. The moment we do not stop comparing to others, you may be getting 2 crores per month, still you will not be the happiest person. The only solution for being happy is never ever compare yourself with others. In fact, I've learned it I've really learned it from my teacher. So compare yourself. For example, this is my first presentation to this. So I really want to, I should compare myself with, say, tomorrow again Cyber invites me. I should compare, Raju, last time what have you done? Are you better than that? Rather than comparing myself with my previous speaker who has spoken yesterday. Because there's no end to that comparison. Where will you end? You keep on comparing, there's no end, and that leads to depression and getting addicted to all sorts of antisocial activities. So the mistake lies where? Compare. You have a 32-inch TV, be happy about it. You look at your neighbor, he has 42. Then your wife tempts you. Why do you also go? So, but what do we do with 32? Put it in the bedroom. Is it useful? Is it not conspicuous consumption? Is that extra gadget needed? So everything essentially because we compare. Anyway, so to cut it short, sometimes we may be unethical. We may bribe somebody. We may want our publication to be, we try to do some kind of, try to influence people, talk to them, all that may happen because you want to compete with your peers. Your neighbor has got 5 publications. I also want 5 publications. That's really not the way. Anyway, but sometimes. Then securing grants. Again, it's because there's a pressure from the director. See, your neighboring institute has got a lot of grants. Why? What are you doing? We are paying you the same. They have got a special status. Have we got it? So sometimes due to that pressure also, we may have to be a bit unethical in some sense. Okay. And the last part, which is more applicable to sciences, is that, you want to be the first one to discover. And that's where it's really applicable to automobile industry. All of us know that how many times, there's a deadline, and because of the deadline, people launch the vehicles. People launch the gadgets, electronic gadgets or anything. Then what do? They call back. All the vehicles that are sold during this period, please get back, because there is something wrong with the gear system. There is something wrong with the brake. There is something wrong with the accelerator. First and foremost, who asked you to have that? Of course, I do understand competition is there, but don't have targets which are not, reachable. You can try to bite what you can achieve. Do not try to bite more than what you achieve. Then that leads to, again, depression and other things. So we need to be very important that when we give a commitment that, okay, by next 3 months, I want to do something, don't do something which is imperfect. Let it be perfect, because you're offering to God. Remember, you may say, I'm offering to a journal, but remember, end of the day, if I consider that every other aspect in the society is God, so you're offering to God. So in offering something to God, will you do something which is imperfect again? The answer is obviously no. Anyway, so this is another reason. So you want to be the first one to discover. My pharma company has found out this medicine, so I'm the first one. So with a lot of loopholes, I know there are loopholes, but still I release the product, right? Sometimes you can call back, but imagine if it is medical. Is there a scope? You have to call back, the dead body, in other words. So it's not possible that everything you can call back. Vehicles you can call back, gadgets you can call back, but can you ask people to come back and say, we are sorry, this has an effect on something? Again, just this morning I read that the Pfizer vaccine has effect on 4 or 5 people. I mean, due to hurry, we want to do it, and I want to be the first fellow. So I published saying that, okay, there is a vaccine for COVID. But before releasing it, how perfect it is. So that's where we have to be very realistic when it comes to setting the target. So sometimes just to be the first one to discover, we may have to, rush. So we just have half an hour more. Yeah. So again, on paper, we know there is need for research. There is need for ethics. And so there's need for research also. Obviously, we got to publish. There is need for ethics in research, but what might really happen is knowing on one side is one thing, but not following in another aspect. And most of us follow on the other side of it, where we may try to misconduct. We may try to be unethical. We may not try to be ethical in that sense. So broadly, the research misconduct, that's a standard word that they use in the literature, essentially includes 3 aspects: fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. Some say plagiarism, it is plagiarism. Okay, so fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. So fabrication, as the name suggests, you are making up, you are cooking up. I mean, again, I myself caught most of the times, again, to be very frank with you, in a regression model, I'm sure all of us are aware of this example. To identify a particular variable is significant, it should have a high t statistic, or probably a variable should be significant, should be above 3, whatever the value. So see, nobody's checking me, right? I'm alone doing research. So instead of 0.9, I can put 1.9. Instead of 0.9, I can make 2.9. Nobody can question me because I'm doing it. You must say nobody's watching, man. Then I publish. Do you think the reviewer actually has the time to cross check, and then he himself will do the empirical analysis and then say what your results are right? He will not have time. So end of the day, who is kind of being unethical? It is the author. It is me who is doing it. So we try to make up. Sometimes we cook up the data. Again, very unfortunate to social sciences. Of course, now things are streamlining these days. Let's also be on the optimistic side. But frankly, lot of our questionnaires done by our seniors, I'm saying elderly people, the questionnaires were filled up under the tree. They go to a village, they are supposed to go door to door, but how many of them really go door to door? It's a fact. Even to this day in government agencies, people come, they don't really visit everything, every house door to door survey, but they don't do. They sit under the tree and then fill up who will check Ellaya, Mallaya, Pullaya, age 32, age 42. And the beauty of first-hand information, the primary data is nobody can cross-check. If it's secondary data, for example, I take the data from RBI, then I can say, okay, somebody can cross-check because the data is the same, whether I access it or Sharma sir access it. But if I have primary data, somebody have done for say mandals around Puttaparthi, do you think ISR will come all the way and then check it up? Obviously, it will not. So this is where I'm trying to make us understand that we should not go for fabrication. We should not cook up the data. We should not cook up the results. We should report what it is. And one important thing, again, most of us fall into the trap is we always want to prove that this is significant. Why do we have that prejudgmental aspect about it? Why not we go? Research is open-minded. You are searching. Searching. Suppose somebody gives a bag of something, and then can you search? What do you mean search? I am searching as to where my laptop is. I am searching as to where. So you don't know where it is. You're searching into. You're diving into that. But what we have want most of the times is we have a preconceived notion. I want to prove that foreign direct investment is detrimental to economic growth. So somehow I keep on estimating my model to such a way that I show that it is detrimental. But it is wrong. We have to show the results as they are. Okay, so let us not have the preconceived notion that the result should be positive. No, that's why it is research. But unfortunately, it's like, again, don't mistake me if somebody is from Telugu industry. In Telugu film industry, we never want hero to die. Just imagine how many stories are there where hero dies. Not many. Because, we can't digest hero dying. How can it happen? Right? But other industries, hero is hero, but it's a normal phenomenon, he dies. So what I'm trying to make us understand is that it is not that we should always want to prove something right. So let us not have that preconceived notion. Let us open up, do the research, whatever the results are, publish it. At the most, it may not be accepted, but you are convinced. I'm happy, I'm perfect. Yes, I'm convinced that this variable is not significant. Let us not do research for satisfying somebody. A lot of research in social science happens is we want to prove that, for example, Manrega is very effective. But how many of us know that Manrega is really effective? Let us be very frank. How many of us prove? I mean, I'm not saying intentionally prove that. How many of us really show the correct picture? No, none of us. So fabrication is one thing where we try to play with the numbers, okay, results. Then the second part is manipulating the research materials. Again, this doesn't happen in social sciences, but happens mostly in sciences, where you try to change the gadget. You try to change, for example, even again very frank, there is this plagiarism. I'll come to the third component. See, there's a plagiarism. Everyone knows there are softwares like Turnitin, Urkund, and other things. But unfortunately, every law has a loophole. That's a fact. Every law has a loophole. So there is a loophole in the plagiarism as to you can relax up to how much percentage. I mean, actually UGC says 14 words. So we should not relax that norm beyond 14 words. But I tell you very frankly, they don't go by words, but they go by percentage. Suppose I go for plagiarism check, and my thesis student finds a plagiarism of 30%. I say, brother Suresh, what is this? Your plagiarism is so much. Oh, is it so, sir? Sir, 1 minute, sir. Tuck, tuck, tuck. Because see, unfortunately, we are not aware of it. So he manipulates the instructions. He manipulates the settings, and the settings is increased from 14 words to 3%. The moment is so, which means you can't take 3% of your report from somebody. 3% is sizable. Suppose 300 words. 3% of 300 words, 300 pages is a big chunk. So all that is more than 3% only is considered as plagiarized. So immediately gets it down from say 30% to 2%. Sir, see, sir, now it is right. So, I mean, some of us are unaware. Oh, we say, yeah, yes, you are right. Okay. So I will proceed. I will forward. Okay, it's plagiarism free. I certify that. I sign. I put my stamp. But are we aware that it is not? So what happens eventually is that people may try to manipulate their research materials. Again, when it comes to practicals, when it comes to adding two chemicals, they manipulate. They add intentionally something more chemical so that they get the desired output. So they can manipulate the materials, they can manipulate the equipment, they can manipulate the processes. The way it is to be done, it's not being done, and they try to again social sciences we see a lot. They can try to omit the data. Suppose you feel, suppose you have taken a sample period from 90, you say a post-reform period. That means 1990 to 2020 or whatever. But if suppose your results are not very conducive, what do you say? You omit first 5-6 years. Sometimes it is genuine. Sometimes you do it because the results are not satisfying. You omit post 2008. You say post crisis period, everything answered, so let me reject. So you omitted first post reform period. The initial part of reform, 5-6 years. Then you omitted the last 7-8 years. What is remaining? 10 years. But your title is under the new economic policy regime, 20 years, so 25 years. But your study is only for 10 years. Is that meaningful? So this is where we need to understand that we should not try to manipulate. So let's not manipulate the material or the equipment and things like that. Then the plagiarism, I'll come to it more details. That is where it is not your idea. We just borrow the idea from somebody. We just copycat. We take their ideas, they take processes, we take the results, words without, we can. See, nobody is born, we are not endowed with ideas, right? The moment you are born, it's not that, oh, I have this wonderful idea, so let me test this. No. Of course, all of us have learned, based on our literature review. We have learned what are the issues that people are talking about. So in fact, we strongly believe that literature review is a very important chapter, when you're in the MA stage, when you're doing a dissertations, or even when you're doing a thesis, PhD. I ask my students that spend at least 6 months on literature review, because you have to understand what are the issues that people are talking about, what are the issues, what are the methodology that people have used, what are the issues that people are looking at. So you, in that sense, you have to borrow the thoughts, you have to borrow the ideas. But what is important is that as I borrowed, but am I giving credit to that person? That is plagiarism. So plagiarism doesn't say that every idea should be your idea. For example, if I'm using econometrics technique, regression, it is not I who found out regression. I'm using a technique, to identify, for example, antigen and antibodies in COVID. It's not I who pioneered this concept. It is already there existing. It's just that I have borrowed them. But so when I borrow somebody's ideas, when I borrow somebody's thoughts, some processes, what we need to acknowledge them. So that acknowledgement is something which is missing. And I should also go on record, somehow we feel the more we acknowledge, the more we cite, people think, oh, this is not your work. But let me tell you very frankly, it is wrong notion. But again, very misfortune notion that all of us have is the more articles you read, that means it's not your work. No, that is a wrong notion. Pick up any foreign journal. I'm telling you, any standard. I don't say foreign, I'm sorry. Any good journal in India. Pick up any good paper. they would have referred to at least 30 to 40 articles. So remember, the more you read, it only impresses that, wow, this is a guy who has read a lot. Of course, don't cite for the sake of citing. That's also very important. I'll come to that. So plagiarism is equally important. So we have to borrow the ideas, we have to borrow the thoughts, but it's important that how far we're able to give credit to them. So these are the three ways of, I would say, unethical practices that we generally do. So either we try to, make up the data, or we try to manipulate the things. And the third part is we try to borrow somebody's work, somebody's activity, and not giving them credit. So these are the three ways of research misconduct that we generally have. Okay, what are the ethical principles? Okay, I'll quickly run through. All of us know. So we need to be honest. So honest in every activity that we are doing, right from starting. As I told you, I've started working on this presentation. From then till I deliver, I should be honest. So honesty is very, very important. Objectivity, don't be biased to anybody. Don't be subjective, be objective. Don't be biased to anybody. Then integrity. And this is very, very important. Integrity here is keep up your promises and agreements. So given a commitment that, okay, on such and such date, I will deliver this, you should be able to. Sincerity is very important. Bhagwan, the revered founder, chancellor of our institute, calls it as Trikarna Shuddhi. I'm sure some of us heard of that concept. Trikarna Shuddhi, that is thought, word, and deed. Unfortunately, in the modern day, in the current scenario, we don't have the Trikarna Shuddhi. We think something, we speak something, we act something, and we become hypocrites. Suppose when we say students, hey students, we should be plagiarize free, we should not copy some, and suppose if you are the first one to copy, we will first practice it. All of us are enough preachers. I think we should be practitioners. We need to practice these things. So it's very important that we need to have this integrity of thought, word, and Trikarna Shuddhi. So what we think, we should speak. What we speak, we should put into practice. Once there is kind of consensus among all these things, then I tell you are a successful person. That's a simple principle or a mantra, I would say, we all need to follow, Trikarna Shuddhi. So we need to have integrity. We need to be careful. So sometimes, as I told you, we are very careless. Sometimes there will be careless errors also. There will be some typos and these things. But to great extent, we should minimize. For ourselves, we should read our report once, twice, thrice, or 4 times. So it's very, very important that we need to be very careful, and we should avoid mistakes to great extent possible. As again, including myself. So the more I speak with you, I'm getting emotional, but I'm trying to convince myself that, Raju, are you following this? So it's a learning curve. Yes, you should. And I've been doing, frankly speaking, but I should try to be 100%. That's what I'm trying to, make you understand. So we should try to minimize our errors and be open. When I say open, I'm not trying to say open in the sense of, sharing your data with somebody. Suppose I've got a granted fund of 1 crore rupee, and it's a process. It's not that I've shared with my competitor. No, that's not openness here. Openness is open with your criticism, open to be be critical. Somebody criticizes, Raju, what you're thinking is wrong. Yes, sir, I do agree. I take it. Let's not have that, competitive spirit. Let us disagree on some aspects. Let us agree to disagree on some aspects. That's better way. Okay. So this is where we need to be open. Then intellectual property, as I just told you, we do have a lot of patents and other things, including plagiarism is part of that. We need to honor that part. We need to, we need to give the credit to all the contributors that I've been having. And confidentiality, as I told you, again, unfortunately, I thought I will share, but I'm not able to do that. Very recently, I'm sure, in the COVID scenario, initially when the HCQS were taken, okay, everybody said it was very good and all that. Then a study came saying that it is dangerous. It's, it creates risk to heart and all. But the owner, none other than the US guy, comes with the proof that there are these 2 mischief, people who were in the part of the company. They did unethical practice of publishing something which is not right. Why? Because they don't want this company to prosper. So this is where I'm trying to tell you confidentiality, trying to dig our own grave, trying to poke our own eyes. Whom is getting hurt? It's we. So we need to be confidential when it comes to, especially sciences, when we do a lot of research, we should not declare the things much before. Okay, it gets patented and then it's a different story. Then responsible, let us not publish for the sake of publishing. Okay, we should publish where do you think there is a scope for enhancing the literature. There's enough literature. Can my contribution add to the existing literature? So try to publish for the sake of that rather than publishing for the sake of publishing. Then we need to be good mentors as well. All of us are good teachers. I don't deny that. But we also need to be good mentors, because this, whom you're talking about, your students are going to be the future leaders. They're going to be the future, faculty. So we need to mentor them. We need to give quality time. We do talk about teaching, we talk about techniques, but are we giving quality time with them as to what a responsible person is all about? So we need to mentor them, we need to educate them and all. Then respect your colleagues. This part of your research, if you have a research team of 10 people and you are heading that, but doesn't mean that you are head and the other 9 are inferior. Everybody is equally important. So more for social sciences, when they do this joint work where 10, 15 people are involved as a group, it's important that you respect your colleagues, and you need to be legal. So you need to know the rules and regulations of the land and so on. Socially responsible. I've been telling you again and again that we have to promote good. We should encourage something which is good. We should discourage which is bad or which is anti-social. Do not be, again, same thing, biasness. Do not be biased to somebody. Avoid discrimination. Okay, when it comes to, when a paper comes, for example, you're a reviewer, don't reject just because it comes from a government college. I'm just giving an example. That should not be the case. If the content is fine, if it's worth, kindly publish that. So we should try to be non-discriminant to that extent. And then we need to, as I just told you, we need to compete with ourselves. Compare yourself with ourselves and with this improvement. So these are all part of your ethical aspects. And then the last two aspects is again more to sciences, where where there's a need for giving animal care. Initially what happens, a lot of these clinical trials are done by animals, right? So when the trials are done animals, we need to give enough care for the animal. Just because the animal, it doesn't mean that we can kill it off, and nobody has a birthright to do that. So we need to be very careful. And social sciences, a lot of research is done on human beings. Okay, even sciences, of course, also. So we have to be very clear, and we should minimize the risk. So thus we see. So these are all the ethical principles that we need to. So all these constitute your research ethics. So as I told you, it's not strictly to say it is this means no. It's not that. As I just told you, every time you take up an action, is it right or is it wrong? Is it something going to add value addition, or is going to something going to deteriorate the thing? So keep do that check and balance, cross checking. Checks and balances are very, very important. So these are the ethical principles that we have, and I'm very happy. I mean, we have been talking about, and again, don't misunderstand when I say India in that sense. Frankly, the rest of the world, the global pioneers are much better, but I mean, India woke up a little late, and it's as recent as just last year. Okay, it's on December 19th or so. Of course, the meeting was held on 9th August. That's what the slide tells you, but it was published on December 19th or 20th, where the letter was sent to all the university registrars and vice chancellors. What they are asking is that they should have one pre-PhD course. Okay, as I mean, the title of the paper is Research and Publication Ethics, RPE. It's a 2-credit course. It is mandatory. It's good that India, I mean, the government woke up, and I'm very happy on that. So at least, because initially we tried to tend. You may say, so does this mean from tomorrow things will change? No, it will not change, because change is something which cannot happen. You cannot see in a day or two, but it's a process that has begun. So we are tending towards that. Initially we need to pretend. We need to pretend. We need to act. Yes, that's the need of the word. Pretend. Then the pretend becomes tend. Remove that pretend, tend. You start tending towards that. And remove that T, then it becomes end. So pretend, tend, and end. So this is where, let us not be very skeptical that anything is done. Hey, no. I mean, again, I'm not against Modi or for Modi, but what I'm trying to make us understand, something which will, enhance the governance, we should respect that. Okay, I'm happy that the UGC has taken this initiative. So they are planning to introduce this, 2-credit course for all the research scholars. I mean, especially before the registration, pre-registration, we call it as the pre-PhD work entitled namely Research Ethics, Research and Publication Ethics. Okay, before I go to the plagiarism, sir, how much time do I have, sir?
Maybe it's 11, 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay, sir, sure, sir. Thank you very much.
Please.
Yeah. So coming to the last aspect, that is plagiarism. As I told you, plagiarism is one of the ethical aspects of research, because if you remember, other two aspects we covered was where you can try to manipulate, or where you can try to make up the data analysis. The third important component is the plagiarism, where you try to. So as all of us know, plagiarism essentially is, it's not your work, but you show to the world as if it is your work. It's in simple terms, that is plagiarism. Okay, but it is not just confined to the words or the paragraphs or the sentences. It also includes somebody else's ideas. If suppose I go to a presentation, for example, I go to a presentation, and before my presentation I have some other people making presentations, and suppose I get impressed by some presentation, I take note of that, then I come back to my hometown and then I do research. But remember, wait, what was the genesis of this thought? The genesis was the conference which you have attended. So we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge the person who was responsible in giving you that thought, in giving you that idea. I mean, are we to that extent plagiarism free? It is not. At least to start with, as I told you, we are starting is to start with. At least we are, what is visible is, are you copying somebody's work? Is it verbatim as it is? Is that what we're looking at? But that's a very narrow sense of plagiarism. So plagiarism is the act of passing off somebody else's ideas, thoughts, pictures, theories, words, or stories of as your own. So it doesn't say, as I told you, it doesn't say you should not copy. but it says do not give a picture to them as if it is your work. For example, I have taken a lot of these contents from somebody's work. I am not the owner of all these things. So this is where we see that taking any of these things can be considered as the plagiarism. Okay, and if a researcher plagiarizes somebody's work, okay, then automatically we question the integrity, the ethics, and the trustworthiness of his total research. So if suppose the final report is, suppose there's 80% plagiarism in somebody's report. Now, can you tell me, can you trust that report? Can you trust that work? Can you trust the guy who submitted the report? Because 80% is already published by somebody, right? So that's where once it is plagiarized, remember the first thing, that impression that happens is your integrity is lost, the ethics is lost, and the trustworthiness. And that's the reason why of late in Indian journals also, I don't know if you have experienced this, when you submit a research paper for publication, the first thing they ask, they do the plagiarism. If it is more than a certain percentage, it depends from the journal to journal, ideal should be 10%, but about 10 or 20 or 30%, they send it back. Sir, plagiarism is too much. Can you kindly rework on that? So the moment, the report shows it's plagiarized, they start doubting you. Is this your work or somebody's work? So your integrity, your ethics, all that comes into picture. Plagiarism is both illegal and also punishable. Again, I said it's not happening much in India, but it is a matter of time it will happen. It is illegal as well as punishable. And I should share one episode. I don't want to name the institute. I had been as a resource person to one of the institutes a couple of years back. And I tell you very frankly, from the window, library is very big, right? And you have your seniors who done the research kept there. So from the window, I could see people giving away the spiral bindings of the earlier theses. And I was wondering, where was it going? It was going to the nearest Xerox shop, Xeroxing the whole thing except the first sheet. Okay, I mean, of course, those days we didn't have this plagiarism and all those things. I'm talking about a decade back. So this is how it, to that extent. So it's not 1%, 2%, 3%. Totally, it is somebody's work. Only the French sheet is the title of the university name may change, but to that extent, it has been happening. Though just saying the name of the person, everything is remains same. So the point is, it is very illegal and it is punishable also. Okay. Normally, when you talk about plagiarism, we think you are copying. But of late, the journals are insisting on self-plagiarism. Even UGC is talking about that. What is self-plagiarism? See, I've already published a paper. For example, Puttaparthi and frogs living in Puttaparthi. That's the title. Same content. I change the title of that thing and saying frogs available in Puttaparthi, or climatic conditions conducive for Puttaparthi for the frogs to sustain. So what I'm actually doing, I'm just changing the titles and then trying to publish my own work. So that's called self-plagiarism. So that is also being discouraged these days. So it's verbatim copying or reuse of your own research. Many people try. I mean, you can use the idea. There's no harm in that. You can extend, because research is something. Most of the C's, once my PhD is over, my research is over. No, I personally believe the moment you get your doctorate, your actual research is beginning from that day onwards, because research is something that's going to be lifelong. So we need to continuously learn. There's no doubt about it. So what is self-plagiarism is where your own work, you try to publish it with different component, different name. That is also unethical. So both types of plagiarism is supposed to be unacceptable. And I just told you, plagiarism is disciplinary offense. So I mean, again, in our institute, we try to do that. It might affect the marks. If you find plagiarism beyond a point, we try to reduce the marks straight away. Or, again, I'll come to that. UGC in the recent guidelines, they have, 2018, not recent 2018, the given guidelines that the promotion should be stopped. If you feel that somebody's work is plagiarized, the promotion should be stopped. The publications will be rejected. You can't publish anymore. It will be rejected. They'll ask you to publish after 3 months. Your defense is, your thesis is rejected. They'll ask you to resubmit. So this is the significance of plagiarism, and what are the dangers that are associated if you're trying to, plagiarize the work. Okay. And what are the types of plagiarism? Sometimes, as I told you, there are two types basically. One is intentionally you do that, other is unintentional. It is obvious. Every word that I'm talking about need not be, that I have copied. In fact, some of us do experience when you do a plagiarism check. Actually, it is your work. For example, Satya Institute of Higher Learning. It shows it is plagiarized by some. Satya Institute of Higher Learning is my institute name. Even that shows as plagiarism. Yes, there are some limitations of plagiarism. I'm not denying that. But what is important is sometimes you do it unintentionally, negligence. Okay. So it's negligence. Sometimes it is intentional, which is dishonest. Okay. So if it is unintentional, done, accepted. But intentionally, we should never have tried to do. And as I just told you, redundant publications also are considered as plagiarism these days. The third variety coming to picture, where people are trying to publish their own work. I just told you that their own work, they try to publish with little more figures. or changing the sample period from 1950 to say 2018, then 2020, one more paper. So this is not expect. This is also plagiarism in that sense. It should not overlap the existing literature which is already there. Then some people try to resubmit the same manufacturer thing, same journal which is copied, which is already done. That's also unethical. Okay, last slide this is. So how do we try to, last two slides, how do we try to avoid the plagiarism? So the easiest thing is, I mean, again, thanks to my guide, my mentor, Professor Vishwanath Pandit. In fact, you know, when I was when I was doing my research, you know, I used to always work in the front of the system, and I mean, this is an easy trick, and I've learned it personally. I'm trying to share with you. You know, when you're in front of system, when you're doing research, you know, all of us say research means computer, research means laptop, because that's in our psyche. You know, our Pandit says, hey, you people are wasting time. We never knew why he meant was that. Why was he talking about that? Because what he meant was, when you're in the front of a system, you know, your two fingers, okay, Control C, Control V, Control C, Control C, or Control X. Sometimes no X, Control C, Control V. Only three shortcuts, right? Control C, Control V, Control C, Control V. They are the most dynamic ones. Okay, these two fingers operate the maximum. Essentially, what I mean is, you read an article, you don't have time to go through everything. You just take the abstract and call it as LR, literature review. So now I'm able to connect, you know, when you say, why are you wasting time? Hey, you people are wasting time, which means, because most of us feel research means sit in front of system. No. And I have learned it. I have asked my students to follow that. Instead, what you need to do is have a separate book. I tell my students also, dissertation books. Every article that you read, right from day one, try to rephrase into your own language. Grammatically, there may be mistakes. You may not be the best one to publish that. Your English may not be the up to best. No problem. But it is at least plagiarism free. That's the easiest thing that all of us can do is, do not ever get tempted to read an article in soft copy. Take a printout. It doesn't matter. It may cost you something. Your department may bear the cost. Your institute may bear the cost. But take the best article, what you want to read. Read it once, twice, thrice, 4 times, no problem. Understand. Then jot it down in your own words. So I ask all the students, my students, to do that, because that will really work wonders. So the easiest thing is, do this. Don't sit in front of the system. That is the only way to come out of plagiarism. Anyways, that's broadly. Anyway, so this may include technically paraphrasing, that is writing in your own words, citing them. So as I told you, it is not that you are not supposed to quote somebody's work. You can, but you need to cite them. Okay, you need to quote them and you need to give them references. But as I told you, just because citing is available, do not cite everything. As I told you, because, for example, Raghuram Rajan has cited this work. So you think I also should cite, because if somebody looks at my paper, wow, this work is cited by Raghuram Rajan, so this should be great work. No, it's wrong. So don't cite because somebody is citing. Don't cite if you have not used them. That's also equally important. So you have to cite only those articles which you have read. And as I told you in the beginning, the more you cite, it doesn't mean that you have copied work. It only means you're a well-read guy. I'm conviction, I'm telling you, are a well-read guy. So never ever a misunderstanding that, oh sir, if I quote 40 articles, that means I've copied more. No, because you know, these are helping you to get the ideas. These are helping you to identify the methodology. These are helping you to identify the data which is used. So it's nothing wrong in citing. So you have to paraphrase, you have to cite them, you have to quote them, and you have to refer them. So these are the ways in which you try to avoid the plagiarism. And how to detect plagiarism? Of course, on plate, a lot of websites are available, free sites are available, paid sites are available. The Turnitin is the most famous. Even we use Turnitin. UGC has given Urkund, again not everyone, but to most of the institutes they have given Urkund. So well known are Turnitin and plagiarism. Then Grammarly and all those things are available. Some are free, some are paid. Okay, you can do the plagiarism check and then get the thing. And what is the procedure is, again, every institute is supposed to have this institutional research committee. So what they're supposed to do, and that's what we also follow at our institute, be it even a UG assignment. I'm being very frank with you, being it a UG assignment also for a 20 mark, even that goes through plagiarism check. Because if you don't start removing the weed at the initial stage, once it grows up, it's very difficult. You're habituated to that. So it's very important that we need to take it out at the bud itself. So from UG itself, we have courses from undergraduates and postgraduates. From UG itself, we go for plagiarism check, and we have to give a certificate that it is plagiarized free. So it's a responsibility of the supervisor and also the student. So we have this institutional research committee who is supposed to check this whether plagiarism is there or not, and to what extent it is plagiarism, and most important, you know, to counsel the students. In fact, what I do is, suppose I take some student for my under my as PhD. The first thing I tell him is, right from day one, brothers, plagiarism is very, very important. From day one, try to write in your own words. That's it. That's the simplest mantra you can think about. Don't ever give him chance to copy paste. Okay, that's very, very important. Okay, And this is a UGC rule. Again, I don't have time. I'll go through. It's all available on the website. We all know 2018 it was published. So it has groupism level 0 up to 10%. They accept it. They say fine. But 10 to 40, it is like its risk begins to picture, where the student has to resubmit within a stipulated time, that is within 6 months. Then 40 to 60 within 1 year, and above 60, your program itself is cancelled. I mean, let's be very frank. If you plagiarize all our earlier PhDs of our institutes, we know the maximum amount of plagiarism that will happen. Okay, I'm not saying, I'm not blaming anybody. That was a thing, nobody bothered about it. But now things are changing, and when we want change, we should be part of that change. We should not only speak, we should practice that. So, and the same with respect to the publications, the same thing, 10%, 10 to 40, all these are available in the website. You can do it. And these are the things, for lack of time, I'm not going to detail. These are the detailed way how you can try to plagiarize, how to minimize your plagiarism. I'll leave the PPT, you can refer later. And these are the general guidelines. Okay, last minute or so. Okay, my personal experience with respect to these two aspects. One is on the report writing, other is regarding the ethics part. First important, I can call them as conclusions or whatever you want, but my personal experience is, among all that, executive summary is the most important thing. Because when you submit a proposal, when you submit a report, that, as I just told you, the boss may not have the time to go through everything. In fact, I have seen many people, they read the proposals during their flight journey. They start from Hyderabad to Delhi, they have to attend a selection process. So during 1.5 hours, they go through your proposals. Just imagine 10 proposals. How much time do they have? Each fellow 20, 30 pages. Do they really have that much of time? No. So what they do, they go by the summary. So executive summary should be very, 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 very impressive. That is the most. And if you are not able to win him in the first few lines, you will never win him. I'm telling you with conviction. If you're not able to win him, in the sense, if you cannot impress the audience in the first few lines, you will never able to convince him. So that's very, very important. So the first thing is in report writing, summary is very, very important. The second, regarding rules and regulations, again, I said, all of us know rules are there. Tell me which country doesn't have rule. Every country, every organization, every institution, on paper, they have rules. Rules are always there. But what I personally feel is, it's important to train these people to have that mindset to follow the rules. That's very, very important. We have the rules, but are we following them? We are not. So why we are not following? Because I told you, we did not have the proper mindset to train the people. We only scared them. In fact, Bhagwan, our founder chancellor, tells that discipline is something which should come from source and not from force. Because when it comes from force, you try to do as long as the person is, you wear helmet because police is standing there. If there is no police, your helmet is behind the bike. So helmet is for the police or for you? That we need to make them understand. Not for the challan of 100 rupees, 1,000 rupees, or cancellation of the license. Okay, these are materialistic things. But your life, you can substitute hands, legs, Jaipur, but you don't have a head, right? Like we all of us are not Ganeshas where you can have a substitute for our heads. So that is what we need to convince the people. Okay, so what I personally feel is that rules are there, but we need to train people to have that mindset to follow these rules. And we should never ever try to mend the rules. That's called convenient philosophy. Yes, sir, I know, but and then we tell the story. No, let's not. Let us try to minimize that storytelling. Okay, so I think that's it. So with this few words, I end my session. I'm sorry I've taken a couple of minutes extra. It's 12:03. I thank you once again, the committee and the members and all the management of the CyPER for giving the opportunity. If there's time permit, we can open for the session. I leave it to the organizers because I think they have one more session at 12:15. So thank you very much. Saira.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir. Let me open up the session for some questions. Maybe either you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can put the question on the chat box. The session is open for discussion for 5 minutes, for the coming 5 minutes. Yeah.
Sir, your presentation is very good.
Thank you very much, Shirol sir.
Excellent. I never heard.
Thank you, Shirol sir.
So clear, so crystal, and there were so many misconceptions even among faculty members. And that you made very clear. Thank you, sir. Congratulations.
Thank you, Shirol sir. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving the opportunity.
So, Mayor, thank you for an excellent presentation. I think I did not, I would say that this is the best one I've had so far.
No.
Thank you so much.
We will be
Thank you.
Ask a question also. Yeah. So We'll wait for a minute for the participant. If at all anyone would like to ask a question, can unmute themselves, or they can put it on the chat box so that we can have an interaction for 5 to 10 minutes.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, please. Please go ahead, Dr. Amardeep Jadhav.
Yeah, sir. Your presentation was very nice and informative. Just I wanted to ask the question related with the report writing. Hope I am audible.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead. Please go ahead, Jadhav.
Sir, there are the two opinions whether to write the limitation of the study or not to write. So, in the viewpoint of view, what the researchers are supposed to do, whether to write the limitations of the study or not?
See, instead I would use a proper term. Instead of saying limitations, we can say a scope for further study. That only tells you that you're not saying what you have done is the best and this is the end of it. There's always scope to improve on. So it's a proper term or a jargon can be is, instead of saying limitations of the study, let us say the scope for further study. So that only tells, yes, I have done my work. It doesn't mean this is everything. There's a lot of scope for further study and this can be incorporated. So that may be a better, because when you say limitation, it's more of negative thing. So often nobody uses the limitation of study. Say scope for further study. That means you are agreeing that I have not done everything. There is something still left out.
True, sir.
Thank you, Jadhav, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Any more questions, please?
Hello.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah, please,
Yeah.
please, Tanmay, ma'am, please.
Yeah. Good afternoon, sir. Firstly, it was a very informative session and we thoroughly enjoyed it. Sir, my doubt is about self-plagiarism.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you that I have seen many of the students carry forwarding their PG research for their PhD studies. So obviously the readings will be different due to the time period. But I want to ask that whether using certain information from the previous research and including it in the new research, for example, some reviews or any other information of the introduction part, will that be also termed as self-plagiarism?
No. See, there's a thin line between what you are talking about self-plagiarism in that sense. One is, yes, definitely. For example, when I do my own case, I've done masters in economics here in this institute, and then my area was international economics, exchange rate. That was my thing. Now, when I go to PhD, that should be connected to my MA economics. So in terms of the thought, in terms of the methodology, in terms of understanding, because I don't want to take up a new topic altogether, like for example, importance of education as our human capital as a new topic. No, because then I'm wasting my 2 years thing. So in that sense, there should be connection between your earlier courses and this course, no doubt. In terms of, your own work, so you can get the ideas. But what do you mean self-plagiarism is? Already a published work in your say MA dissertation, for example, same 5 chapters you put it as PhD, or suppose you do MPhil, same chapters you call it as PhD also, just by changing the title. That is self-plagiarism.
Okay.
So
one can.
Nothing wrong in correcting the thread, because end of that I have mastery over that. That will happen. And one important thing is we are students for our life. That's why I told research doesn't end at that. So that's not plagiarism. Self-plagiarism. Self-plagiarism is, I told you, verbatim as it is, your own work, no doubt, but just copying and then pasting it here, that is self-plagiarism. That is something which is expected to be minimized in these days. Even researchers are talking about that. But ideas can definitely be moved forward, because nobody can question, because then, as I said, you have to start everything from scratch again. Then your 2 years are ruined. So that's not in that sense. So ideas can be taken because you are the originator, you are the one who thought about it. But building upon, for example, I did the basic determinants first. Now I want to understand the interdynamics. Fine. Then I want to do a structural where. Then I don't. So this is how the evolution is. So that's not self-plagiarism.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you,
Sir, I have a doubt, sir.
Yes, sir, Vijay.
Sir, thesis, PhD thesis, publication in the book form. So, is it come under self-plagiarism? That is one question, sir. And the second one is, I observed some research articles. Those people are citing their names so many times in their article.
Yeah.
So, is it comes under self-plagiarism?
Yeah, 2 things. So I'll go to the first one first. See, I do a PhD. Remember, it is not published still. It is unpublished work. That thesis can be, for example, my own thesis, I wrote it as a book now. That's not plagiarism, because that was unpublished, which has become published now. But what is important is, if I try to publish this same,
May
If
I
I
request
publish,
Viresh sir to mute himself? It is disturbing the presentation.
yeah. So when I publish my own PhD, it's not plagiarism. It's not self-plagiarism also, because that is unpublished work. Publishing it now for you write a book and then you make papers out of that book. Every chapter is one paper. That is
May I request Viresh again to mute himself? It is disturbing.
Viresh sir, can you unmute yourself?
Viresh, please mute
Sir,
yourself.
sir, the owner also can mute it.
Hello, sir.
Organizer can mute it.
Hello, sir. Hello, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah.
Please, Viresh sir. Sir, Sharma sir, organizer can mute it, sir. Mute him.
I'm muting him.
You can mute him.
One.
Sir, can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Sir, please,
Every time I'll mute him.
Sir, when we do plagiarism check, so it is usually checking is done based on the published papers only, isn't it, sir?
Sir, you're right. You're right.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
On the published work, only, obviously. On the published work.
There are no other questions. May I request, with the permission of the resource person, may I come to the last part of the vote of thanks, please?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, Sharma.
Yeah. So on behalf of the Cyber, the organizing committee, and the RUSA committee, the Atal FDP organizing committee members, we are extremely grateful to Dr. Raghavan Razu for delivering an excellent session on writing, ethics, and plagiarism. We know Dr. Razu for so many decades. He is an excellent econometrician. He is excellent in the technical part of social sciences. But today we discovered that he is also excellent presenter in report writing. And I'm sure that he will help us in all in the years to come. Thank you. Thanks a lot for delivering an excellent session. I request all the participants to just wait for 10 minutes, and we'll be starting with the next session. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Once again to all the participants for giving the opportunity. And thank
you, sir. Thank you.
Sir.
आणि सर मी पण आम्ही तुम्हाला सांगितलं सर म्हणजे असं काय नाही
Sonia madam, we are ready from Pune. तिथं हिलिंग बघून करतो म्हणजे दिसत राहील तुला टेस्टिंग पाठवू
इथे थांबण्याची आवश्यकता नाही
नाही ते गरज पडली तुला बोललो मी तुला देऊ
प्रेरणा मॅडम आणि स्वप्नील सर audible?
Very low voice, very low. एक मिनट
आवाज नहीं
आपल्या विषयी बोलतो.
ते कोण बोलत ते बोलतील ना मधला ब्रेक घेतला त्यांनी